This is Macon Memories at Randolph-Macon College. I'm Lynda Wright. Today is May the 5th, 2008, and today I'm here with Carroll LaHaye and Rachel Anderson.
Thank you. I'm Carroll LaHaye, and I'm the women's basketball coach and director of physical education.
And I'm Rachel Anderson, Professor Emeritus, retired in 2002 or 2000. I was here part-time for a couple of years, so I don't know when my official retirement was, probably 2000. And I'm just proud to be here today. Back in early winter of 72, one day a group of us were sitting around a table at the Schaefer Street Cafe or dining hall at VCU, and someone kept talking about women being accepted full-time at Randolph-Macon in the fall. And of course they didn't say Randolph-Macon, they said Randy Mac. So I got to thinking, that's got to be Randolph-Macon in Ashland, because I'd never heard it called that. So on the way home that afternoon, I decided if they will have women at Randolph-Macon full-time, they need a full-time person. So I came in and I went into Peel Hall, and they directed me to Dean Howard Davis and talked to him a few minutes about the possibility of becoming a full-time, or if they needed a full-time PE person and coach, and he said, yes, we definitely will. So he sent me over to see Coach Hugh Stevens. And Coach Stevens and I talked a few minutes, and he only asked me a couple of questions. He said, can you coach tennis? And will you sponsor the cheerleaders? And I said, of course, I'm coaching tennis now, and I don't think sponsoring the cheerleaders will be very difficult. So he said, good. Go over and tell Dean Davis that you're fine, that show you where to sign the paper. So I went over and signed what I need to sign. In a few days, I got a contract in the mail. So getting to Randolph-Macon to me was a very easy and simple process compared to what the hiring procedure is today. But then I lived here happily ever after until I retired in 2000. And of course, my first position was coaching the women's tennis team and developing a PE program for the women. There had been women on campus in small numbers over the years, and there was a part-time woman here who, had programs for the few women who were here, but she did not want the position. So that made it easy, too. I didn't feel like I was, taking anything away from anybody. So I started working on a PE program, and of course, we started from scratch with so few women. There were only 50 women in that first class. And most of the women accepted then were here because Granddaddy said, if you'll go to Macon, I'll pay you tuition, or Dad graduated, or brother was here, or they had a direct tie to the college. So they were a different group of girls. We did not get a cross-section of the public school or even the private school, as most of them did come out of private schools. But they were brave little souls who decided they would jump in the pond and swim. And so they did, and we developed programs for them over the years. And the PE programs, I started with just the basic things and then went into areas of interest. And the way that I would get people to teach those areas of interest was just, if I knew someone who taught dance and I knew she had a good program, I would call and say, hey, can you help us out 2 days a week or 3 days a week? And most of the classes were 2 days a week. And so we just went from there. And the teams were started basically the same way. Some of the teams, like the specialized teams like lacrosse, there weren't enough girls who knew what lacrosse was to even have an intramural program. But most of the varsity sports grew out of intramural interest because we had to know that we had enough women to field a team before we could start. And that brings up another funny topic for me. That first team, the first 7 or 8 years of tennis, and some of the other teams experienced these growing pains with their women too. They had no commitment, and it was very hard. Like if I had a tennis match and we were going to leave at noon and 3 people showed up, and then I'd go through the halls and find somebody. If anybody had a white tennis dress, I assumed they knew enough about tennis to play. So come on, play for us, because I didn't want to, continuously cancel matches, because then that didn't, then the next year I would have a really hard time putting a schedule together. And we played a lot of country club teams, which made it easy for us. And if we showed up with 5 people, they would accommodate us. And because we didn't have a conference then, we were just, having fun. And even after we got into a conference, we went down to one of our early ODAC experiences. It was a rainy weekend, and we were involved, doing very well in the tournament. And so we had been playing all day long, and it was well into the night, and you only had like 3 courts indoors, so it took forever to play in tournaments, so they had to play through the night. Well, at about 10 o'clock, it was time for my number 1 doubles team to go on the court, and I started looking for them, and I couldn't find them. And then finally, one of the girls just looked at me and said, "Coach, they went home at 8 o'clock. And now I had been on another court involved with, the girl who was out there, and they didn't even come and tell me they were gone. But back then, we drove our own cars. So they just decided, well, it's time to go home. It was one of the big dance weekends. So that was more important than the tournament. So they came home. But we made it through those years, and you can see how far our programs have come over the years. And Carroll was one of the first, not the first, but one of the first full-time women that came into the program. And one day, and it's probably one of the best things I ever did, because one day this little girl showed up in my office and said, "Can I work with the basketball team? I just want to be here. I just want to be involved with the basketball." And I said, "Sure, help yourself. We need all the help we can get." And that little girl was Carroll LaHaye. And so I'm going to let her comment on that, because from there we just have grown in leaps and bounds, and a lot of it has been things that she has done.
Well, as you mentioned, Rachel, kind of like you, I was in the right place at the right time, exactly. And I do refer to that a lot by saying, I had a full-time job with Hanover County Parks and Recreation, and I missed basketball since I had played high school basketball and collegiate basketball, and so I did come over. I knew Rachel through a mutual friend of ours, and went over and I said, "Rachel, I really would like to help with basketball. Is there any way that I can get involved?" And so she went to the head coach and asked Lynda Lurch if it would be possible for me to be a volunteer assistant. She knew that I probably wouldn't be able to travel too much except for on weekends, because I wouldn't be able to get off work throughout the week. And I guess, as you could say now, the rest is history, because what happened after that was Lynda Lurch left in late July of 81. I was a volunteer assistant in 81, and then Lynda Lurch left in late July of 81 to take the head coaching job at Cornell. Well, at that particular time of the year, it's very difficult to find a head coach. Even back then, when there were a few more coaches, or not as many coaches, women coaches available. But Rachel came to me and she said, "What do you think about being the head coach?" And I said, "Oh, that would be wonderful. This is my great opportunity." And so she interviewed me. I had to go through the interview process with the dean at that particular time was Elton Hendricks. And so I had to meet with him, and then Coach Stevens, of course, was still the athletic director. And so I thought everything was good. I was going to be the head basketball coach at Randolph-Macon College. And then Rachel called me at home one night, and she said, "If you want to coach, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have to coach the soccer team, the basketball team, and the lacrosse team." And I said, "Well, I don't really know anything about soccer, and I don't know anything about lacrosse either." And she said, well, if you want the job, you'll learn. And I said, oh, yes, I will learn. And so I studied that game of soccer and that game of lacrosse. I actually had one of our former players, Lisa Usry. I went out and practiced lacrosse with her that whole fall semester of that year.
And she did so well that, lo and behold, come spring, back then we were not in a conference per se, because when we came in, the men's teams were in split divisions. Some were playing in ODAC, some were playing Division II. So our women were like in no man's land, because we weren't part of ODAC, and we were in the AIAW, and that was the women's comparable to the NCAA. And so Carroll studied hard, and lo and behold, come spring, she took that team to the lacrosse team, to the Division II tournament. That was the first opportunity she had that we ever had a women's team, advance to that level.
That was a very exciting time because, as I've already mentioned, I did study and learn the game as much as I could. There were quite a few similarities to basketball, but I had some outstanding athletes, as you well know, Rachel. And we went in seeded 8th in the nation and came home number 5. So we were very excited.
So excited. Thank goodness she had players about her size, because she forgot her suitcases, left everything at home. She got there and had nothing for the whole weekend.
Yeah, that was beneficial to have some players. And plus, I probably was a little more fashion up to date at that point in my life. But anyway, it was a great time. Coach Stevens. He was the athletic director. That was his last year of being the athletic director, and I mean, he never once asked me, what I needed, where were we thinking about staying, were we going to take a bus, vans, whatever. I went in to talk to him one day, and he said, I've got everything taken care of, and you be out at the bus at 1 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. And I said, okay. So we went out, and there was this big old chartered bus right there. We had never traveled by chartered bus. Everything was van travel at that time. And he had taken care of the motel for us, the hotel for us. And in Baltimore, we played at the University of Maryland. And anyway, it was a great time for Randolph-Macon College, and especially women's athletics, because we hadn't been a varsity team for very long. But
no, not at all.
And then we had one player, Nancy Seebeck, who set several national records, which I'm sure have been broken since she played. But she set several national records. Right. She's a member of our Hall of Fame as well. Mm-hmm.
So, getting back to our growing pains, when we were like floating around in what I used to call no man's land, because we didn't really know where we were going as far as the end of the season. We came through that, and finally when we got into ODAC and had like a home, that's when our women's teams really began to develop, because we had some structure. Before then, it was really, we were out of our league, because we had to play teams that were not, comparable to our level. But when we got into ODAC, then we were equal as far as opportunities. At the time, we didn't have the strength in the women athlete, or the woman athlete, but that grew as we were able to. Like Carroll said, she was coaching soccer, basketball, and lacrosse, and that didn't leave any time for recruiting. So as we were able to work that through the administration and reduce the coaching load, each of the coaches were then able to get out and recruit players. And another thing, Carroll was one of the last coaches hired as faculty, and that meant she had to teach, because as a faculty member she had to teach at least 2 classes a week. And so that meant, more time. She couldn't get leave to go recruit. But as the administration was able to budget for the women's programs, I think it all happened so fast that I don't know that they had thought through it financially, because some of our women's programs did at the beginning suffer from budget but that didn't take long to sell.
Yeah, it really is nice to see how far we have come with our women's athletics program because, we both know those early years budgets were limited, but the men's budgets were limited as well.
Right.
And, recruiting is the name of the game at the collegiate level. And, coaching, I think back, I've been at Randolph-Macon for 27 years, and thinking back about coaching those three sports, and I would go from one sport to the next sport, especially during the overlap from soccer to basketball. And it's oftentimes I would practice like lacrosse after basketball, and that would be like 9:30 to midnight at night. But I never thought anything of it. I was young then, and that was the job. And a lot of us, even some of the men's coaches, had coached a couple of sports as well. But nowadays, it's like you specialize in one sport. But recruiting is the name of the game, and I think as we have kind of ferreted that out at Randolph-Macon, so that each one of our women's sports do have a head coach, and their primary responsibility is recruiting and managing the team and everything. That has made a huge difference in our overall athletic program, and they've done a really nice job of recruiting.
Facilities have improved dramatically also. When we started out, it was just we had to stick the women in any little cubbyhole we could find a place for them. And that didn't work out very well. And of course, some of the men had a good time with the women as far as, pulling pranks on them. For instance, one of the most difficult things we had to do was keep the upperclassmen from skinny dipping in the pool because, there were no women here, so the men wanted to go swimming. They just go swimming. And another thing that they had a habit of doing was walking from the locker room to the trainer's room with just a towel around them. Well, that got pretty embarrassing at times, but once the men accepted the women and the fact that they were here to stay, they developed a little more respect for them. And, of course, as the administration saw the need and was financially able to, provided better locker room facilities and that kind of thing for the women, which helped to get the programs separated better.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that Randolph-Macon did as well was that I think they were a front runner in gender equity and Title IX. We had a committee that was responsible for making sure that we were addressing some of the issues that most or probably many women's teams faced as we were growing, and certainly at Randolph-Macon as well. But there were challenges, and I think that we all handled them well, and we do have some great facilities now, and that makes a difference. And but it has been interesting to see how things have changed through the years financially and
Right.
and likewise.
Oh, when the women came to Macon, it was at the peak of the Title IX. That was the hot topic then, Title IX. And I did some hard and long thinking about how I was going to approach the beginning and the developing of the teams. And I saw myself walking into a very well-established program as far as the men's programs were concerned. And I didn't want to make them feel threatened by coming in and beginning to wield the stick with Title IX. So I hope, of course, a lot of people saw me at that point as a do-nothing person because what I did with respect for the men coaches and the men's teams. And in the long run, what I think worked out to be best for the women's team, there were a lot of young women on the campus at the time that just didn't think I moved fast enough and spoke loud enough, but I didn't feel like I needed to. I think the Randolph-Macon community had shown me that given time that it would work out. And it did. And I hope some of those younger athletes realize that now.
Well, certainly I know I do, Rachel. I thank you for everything you've done. But I think that without your influence, your early influence in terms of how to approach adding those sports and what those sports needed, I think has made the programs what they are today. And it's nice. I hope somebody does understand exactly what you went through to get some of those programs going, because she did really go.
Well, for all those years I was here by myself, I didn't feel intimidated at all, but it was constantly, I knew there were so many things that should be going on that weren't, because I was only one person. And I thought of a lot of things I could have been doing, but there was just a time factor there that you can't do but so much and do it like it should be done. So a lot of things did go undone in those early years until we were able to bring in people on full-time. I had some part-time people who would come in at 4 o'clock and, take a team on the field. But it wasn't like having somebody in the office with me to help me develop things. So, again, we moved slow, but it got there.
Well, and there were very successful men coaching at the college at that time, so I think that the part-time women coaches that you had, whether they be male coaches of women's teams or women coaches of women's teams, but I think that all of us respected those male coaches, and we tried to learn from them, and again, I think that some of that has carried over to the success of our programs today, but I know we had good relationships as colleagues, and we had a lot of respect for what the men's programs had accomplished, and trying to copy them and be all that we could be, so that the men in the college could be proud of the developing women's athletic program. I think has come a long way. Well, I know in terms of PE, Rachel had mentioned that that was one of the requirements as I was hired, is that I had to teach in the PE department, and I still continue to teach, and I took over the director of the physical education program from Rachel when she retired, thanks to Dean Rob Holyer offering that position to me. But it's one of the aspects of the job that I really, really enjoy, and that's teaching. My classes, I teach a fitness walking class and also a self-defense class for women. And so I get a chance to see different students and not just basketball players all the time. So I really enjoy that. And I know most all of the coaches that are being hired or have been hired in the last 5 to 6 years have no teaching responsibilities. And so they're strictly staff people. And so I am the last faculty member in the department. But I relish my physical education role, and I think we do a good job. We've piggybacked on to the Brock's Rocks programs. So Bill Blackmore and I work very closely together with the types of programs that he offers, and then we try to get them added into the PE curriculum. And but I'm the only coach that teaches. Well, Mike Rhodes does teach a 3-credit coaching basketball class, but he volunteered to do that. But none of the other coaches have teaching responsibilities.
Teaching was, I'm a teacher. I'm not a coach, and I never let the kids think that I considered myself to be a coach per se. I was more of a glorified manager, and that was kind of a joke with us. But the teaching, that's my thing, is teaching. The coaching, although it had to be a big part of what I was doing here, and the coaching gave me an opportunity to get to know the kids, because I lived with them for 4 years. And I just loved them. I mean, they were my girls. In fact, one night at 7-Eleven, we're the only team on campus that gained weight during season, because all we did was travel to eat. So one night coming home from 7-Eleven, Mom, we got to stop. We're thirsty. We're hungry. I said, you just ate dinner. I know, but we're hungry. We're thirsty. So we stopped at 7-Eleven, and they were all calling me Mom. So the lady behind the counter looked at me. She said, are all these yours? I said, yeah, they're mine. So we had a good time with that. And then the kids they didn't care what they said to me. So when I really had no interest in my appearance, as long as I was clean and everything, I was fine. So, but when the kids started calling me Ms. Luberman was a late night comedian on TV. I never saw her, but when they started calling me Ms. Luberman, I decided, well, I better do something, and I changed tennis shoes or something. But when they started calling me Dweeby Bag, I knew it was time for a complete makeover. So, and they're the kinds of things that I miss. And those are the girls that still remember me at Christmas, and some of them my birthday and things like that. And that means so much to me. But like I said, I worked with each of those. Most of them came in as freshmen and stayed with the team through the senior year. And when you work with kids that close, you really get to know them and you miss them. And so the tennis girls are the people, the students that I really miss. The PE classes are different in that, they come and go so quickly you don't really get to know them. But that was one of the fun things for me, was the coaching. And like I say, I never had a really strong team. Although one year I think the ODAC felt sorry for me and named me Coach of the Year.
Well, Rachel, you had a good team that time. That year, you deserved the Coach of the Year. But, as women's athletics has advanced over the years, one of the things that all of our women's teams do, as well as our men's team, is travel by chartered bus. And, I thought that I would never hear myself say this, but, I kind of miss traveling in vans. I don't miss driving those vans on those snowy evenings or icy evenings or something like that. But, traveling in vans, you got a chance to really be up close and personal to a lot of the players. And as you mentioned, you definitely traveled by van because, the tennis teams do because they're smaller teams anyway. But it brings back some experiences, and I know you have many of them.
Most of the time, I would just drive and listen before they all went to sleep. And I learned more about what was going on campus than you can imagine. Sometimes things I wish I hadn't have heard. But that, like Carroll said, that was just part of it. And it got to the point I really, as I got older, driving the van, that's one of the reasons I asked to get out of the coaching, was because we would leave school 11:30, 11 o'clock, drive to Roanoke, and I'd do the driving, play a match, which, tennis takes forever. You can't really tell how long it's going to take. At 6 o'clock, we'd eat dinner, or around 6 by the time we'd finish the match. And then we had to get in the van and drive back to Randolph-Macon. Well, it had gotten to the point that I really, here I am coming up the road at midnight, and all the girls asleep in the van. And it worried me to the point that I thought I didn't feel comfortable. And so I was afraid that it was time for me to give up coaching. So we were able to work that out. And
yeah, definitely some of the things that have been added to women's athletics, as well as men for that matter, is the travel by chartered bus by the teams, and that makes a big difference in terms of safety. But it does take away some of your personal relationships with the players, and I think players back then they weren't afraid to tell us coaches what was happening on campus. I think kids are a little more secretive now than they were back then, so they didn't mind dropping names and telling you what happened the night before and all of that. And I think now players are afraid they're going to get in trouble, or that they're going to get somebody else in trouble and all that, so they're not as forthcoming with the information. But there have been some changes overall in lots of different areas. But I know one of the things that Rachel mentioned earlier about us joining the ODAC, and I know we competed in the AIAW, as she mentioned, when I first came here, and in 81, 82, that's when the college had to take their women's program and decide whether they were going to play in the AIAW or the NCAA. And, we followed suit with our men's program. And at the time, our men's program was competing at Division II. And so we had to follow suit with them. And we had the women had no business competing at Division II. And so we were competing against schools that had been Division II and had been very successful at Division II. So, I mean, we did as well as we could. We played as hard as we could. We competed and all of that. But when the college made the decision in 1982, I believe, to go 1989 to go
Later.
Division III in ODAC. That's really when our programs, in my opinion, really took off. And in 1991, the college made a tremendous commitment to women's basketball by giving us a full-time assistant coach and the resources to compete and do well. And, I'm a great testimony of that our program took off once those resources were given to us. And I'm just thankful that now when we start a women's team, the resources are already there or well on their way. And so maybe some of the other women's teams haven't had to struggle as much as what those earlier teams, and in particular basketball, lacrosse, tennis.
And at a time when some schools, especially Division III schools, were doing away with some of the what we call minor sports, we were adding them, like the swimming team, and because we had the interest, and the college made the finances available to hire the coach, and we had the beautiful facility. So the Randolph-Macon has really supported the programs as far as seeing that our student body gets what they deserve in the way of backing and the opportunity. And I think opportunity at Randolph-Macon just is unlimited. If the student makes that desire known, the college does everything they can to fulfill that need.
Rachel, you had mentioned earlier about the cheerleading, how you sponsored them, and I know I traveled with you a couple of times on some of those cheerleading trips when we went, and basically they were only cheering for men's basketball. That's all they did. Mm-hmm. And one time, you remember that one time we went to Christopher Newport, and that one cheerleader wanted to have us over to her house after the game. Well, we went to Christopher Newport, but she could not get us to her house from Christopher Newport because she had never gone that way. So she had to call her mom. Back then there were no cell phones, so we had to stop side the road and find a payphone for her to call her parents to find out how we got to her house from Christopher.
From where she was.
So that was hilarious.
Right.
But
we finally did, and it was, if I remember, it was a nice buffet. She had nice meal prepared. We were a little late getting there for it, but we made it. But, yeah, those first girls were something special. And they were brave kids. I mean, they really, to walk into a situation where they know, they're so few in number, it took courage. Of course, they had backing from home, all of them.
Right.
Like I say, had some tie with the Randolph-Macon community. Just about all of them. Not all of them, but just about everybody. So, yeah.
Well, I talked earlier about the lacrosse team that we took to the national tournament, and then in 96, when the women's basketball team made it to the NCAA tournament, the buzz that was all around campus, how excited everybody was, and what an exciting event, because we got to host it.
Right.
We had done so well, and it was the first really organized NCAA tournament that the women's athletic program had hosted. And Rachel, I know you organized it all.
I
You
was
had to put the
I was
bid
acting
in.
as senior women's administrator then, which is comparable now to, I guess, like assistant to the athletic director or something. Anyway, Coach Werner and I. So I walked in and he handed me the NCAA packet and he says, "It's yours." And I said, "Wow." So, but I think it all came off all right. I got the compliment I got from Dr. Payne, who was president at the time. He walked up to me after it was all over and he said, "I want to congratulate you. You have made this look so easy." And I thought, another hour and I would pass out, but I'm glad it went off that way. So
Well, and it was a good event only because Marymount was in it as well as Randolph-Macon, and then
right.
the other teams were from Minnesota University,
Right.
St. Thomas and St. Thomas University, and then Bethel College,
Bethel, yeah.
and so they were both from Minnesota, and they came down. But there was excitement, and so it's nice to see how nowadays when we do make it to men or women make it to the NCAA tournaments, it's kind of like, well, you're supposed to do that. And so that's a sign of success, obviously, that's the expectation that students have and our athletes have and all of that. So yep.
I'm trying to look over these questions and make sure we've covered everything that I guess I'm looking back up here at the beginning of this, role models on campus. When I came, the only other woman here was the librarian, so I really didn't have a whole lot in common to, for her to act as a role model for me, although she did. She was, just a very strong person and just well organized and knew exactly what she was doing, and I thought, And then, of course, Coach Stevens, I guess, was the person who really helped me along and get me started in the right direction. He, again, was one of these people that he got there at daybreak and stayed until midnight. And he was always there if you needed him. He was always in his office or on the baseball field. But he was there and was just so calm and easygoing, and you weren't intimidated by him, and he made me comfortable and made those first years a lot easier than they could have been had it been a different type of personality in that position. But I guess Coach Stevens would be the person that I would attribute my getting my foot in the right direction.
Well, and I have to say that you were my role model and my mentor, Rachel. I came from a very small school in Maine, the University of Maine at Machias, and my college coach was also my volleyball and basketball coach, and she was a very strong woman, so she was a great role model for me as well. She was a little more assertive and a little more aggressive than what you are, so I think maybe I've mellowed out. Maybe I've had a little bit of some personality from her as well as you, but I think your style of management, your leadership was very important to me in my early years, and so you were my role model and mentor, certainly during my early years at Randolph-Macon.
Well, thank you, Carroll, because programs, the director of the programs is like any other position. Your program is only as strong as the people you're able to bring in to do what needs to be done in those programs. And I'm thankful for people like yourself who was able to come in and pick up where my capabilities cut off, because I certainly couldn't have coached women's basketball. So I'm just thankful that I had good people come in, and because that's what makes the difference. It's not what I did, it's just the fact that I was able to find the right people for the job that needed to be done.
Well, and I think that's where our women's athletic program is today. We've got a lot of young, up-and-coming coaches, and I think they have. We've laid the foundation for them, so now it's their time to shine. So we do wish them all the best.
And I can see a lot of changes. As I came through, the programs were very laid back. There was no, there's no gotta win type thing. But now I can see, but just as I was, thinking about retiring and did retire, I could see that there was more emphasis put on performance, and Carroll may not want me to mention this, but I remember we had a athletic director who was here only for 1 year, and he called Carroll in one day and said, Coach LaHaye, you've got to turn this team around, or we'll have to, I can't remember the exact wording, but he as much as said, you've got a year to turn this team around. Well, 2 years later, I wanted to call him so bad and say, "Are you coming to watch the NCAA game?" You know, because he just didn't have the patience to wait for the team that she had to mature to the point they were, you know, really able to compete at the level he wanted them to. But anyway, I could see that there was a lot of things changing, a lot more emphasis put on performance, and a lot more responsibility for the individual coach to see that that was done. Yeah. Oh.
Thank you so much, Carroll LaHaye and Rachel Anderson, for your memories of the early years of women's athletics at Randolph-Macon. Thank you.